Have you ever looked into a mirror and wondered what might be lurking without a reflection? Today, we dive into the chilling world of a vampire monster so terrifying, it leaves no trace, not even in water. Legends tell of this creature slipping silently through the night, hunting without warning, impossible to detect. What makes it so different from the vampires you know? And could such a being exist beyond folklore? Stay with us as we explore its origins, spine-tingling encounters, and the terrifying truth behind a monster that defies reflection itself. This vampire monster has no reflection, even in water. When readers encounter a strange description of a nocturnal predator, an undead revenant, or a shape-shifting terror, a natural question arises: which vampire or monster does this refer to? Folklore across cultures is crowded with beings that drink blood, steal breath, spread disease, or haunt the boundary between life and death. Because many of these creatures overlap in behavior, appearance, and symbolism, identifying a specific monster requires careful comparison rather than guesswork. This essay explains how to determine which vampire or monster a description most closely matches, by examining origin, physical traits, habits, weaknesses, and cultural context, while also acknowledging that many creatures exist along a spectrum rather than as isolated categories. The first step in identifying a folkloric creature is to look at its cultural and geographic origin. Monsters are rarely universal. They are shaped by local fears, environments, and belief systems. A corpse that rises from the grave in Eastern Europe suggests a different tradition than a spirit that drains life force in Southeast Asia. For example, Slavic folklore gave rise to the vampire as a reanimated dead body, bloated with stolen blood, whereas Chinese tradition speaks of the jiangshi, a stiff-hopping corpse that absorbs qi rather than blood. If a description includes burial customs, local landscapes, or religious practices, these clues often narrow the possibilities dramatically. Knowing where a story comes from is often more important than any single physical feature. Physical appearance is the most obvious marker, yet it can also be misleading. Popular culture has standardized the image of the vampire as pale, elegant, and fanged, but older traditions describe far less glamorous beings. Many early vampires were ruddy, swollen, and corpse-like, with blood seeping from their mouths. If a creature is described as shadowy, skeletal, or animalistic, it may align more closely with a gal, a strigo, or a lamia rather than a modern vampire. Likewise, wings might suggest a bat-like demon or a boa constrix, while elongated fingernails and tangled hair can point toward revenants or night hags. Appearance must therefore be weighed against older sources, not just contemporary expectations. Behavior and feeding habits provide stronger evidence than looks alone. Vampires are often defined by what they consume and how they hunt. Blood drinking is the most famous trait, but even this varies. Some creatures drink blood directly from veins, others lap it from wounds, and some consume it indirectly by causing illness. The Indian Vetala, for instance, inhabits corpses and feeds on human vitality rather than blood, while the Malaysian Penanggalan targets pregnant women and newborns, feeding on blood through an elongated neck. If the monster attacks sleepers, spreads wasting disease, or causes sudden death within households, it may belong to a tradition focused on nocturnal visitation rather than open predation. Another key factor is the creature's relationship to death. True vampires are usually undead, meaning they were once human and returned after burial. Signs of this include graves, coffins, funerary rituals, and corpses that do not decay. In contrast, many blood-drinking monsters were never human at all. Demons, spirits, and witches often masquerade as vampires in later retellings, but their origins are different. The Romanian strigo can be either living or dead, blurring this boundary, while the Greek Vrykolakas is distinctly a walking corpse. Determining whether the creature died and returned, or was always supernatural, helps clarify its classification. Weaknesses and methods of protection are among the most diagnostic elements in folklore. Every tradition developed specific ways to defend against its monsters, often rooted in religious belief or local superstition. If a creature is repelled by crosses, holy water, or church bells, it likely belongs to a Christian-influenced vampire tradition. If iron, salt, or fire are emphasized instead, the monster may be older or tied to pre-Christian beliefs. Sunlight is another important clue. Many modern vampires burn in daylight, but older folklore often depicts them as merely weakened or less active during the day. A creature destroyed by decapitation and staking aligns closely with Slavic vampires, whereas one banished by exorcism or ritual chanting may be a spirit rather than an undead body. Transformation abilities also help distinguish between similar beings. Shape-shifting into animals such as wolves, bats, or owls is commonly associated with vampires in Eastern Europe, but it is also a trait of witches and werewolves. If the transformation is voluntary and strategic, it may indicate a vampire or sorcerer. If it is cyclical or cursed, a werewolf or similar lycanthrope becomes more likely. Some monsters do not transform physically but instead leave their bodies behind, as with the astral projecting Krasu or Manananggal. Such details are crucial in narrowing down the possibilities. Social behavior and intelligence further refine identification. Vampires in many traditions retain memories, personalities, and even social relationships from their human lives. They may return to torment family members, settle debts, or haunt familiar places. Other monsters act more like forces of nature, driven by hunger or malice without personal attachment. A creature that targets specific individuals for emotional reasons suggests an undead revenant, while one that indiscriminately attacks villages or travelers may be a demon or wild spirit. Speech, deception, and the ability to pass as human are also strong indicators of vampiric lore. Symbolism should not be overlooked, because monsters often represent abstract fears. Vampires frequently symbolize disease, especially tuberculosis and plague, which drain life slowly and invisibly. If a story emphasizes wasting illness, pale victims, and contagion, the monster may be an explanatory myth for epidemics. Sexuality, taboo desire, and moral transgression also shape vampiric imagery, particularly in later literature. In contrast, child-stealing monsters often reflect anxieties about infant mortality, while graveyard demons may embody fears of improper burial. Understanding what fear the creature embodies helps align it with a particular folkloric category. It is also important to recognize that folklore is fluid, not fixed. Many creatures overlap, merge, or evolve over time. The modern vampire is a composite of Slavic revenants, classical demons like the Lamia, medieval beliefs about restless dead, and 19th-century literary inventions. As stories traveled, traits were borrowed and adapted. A single description may therefore resemble multiple monsters without perfectly matching any one of them. In such cases, the best approach is to identify the closest relatives rather than forcing a single label. Saying that a creature is vampire-like, strigo-adjacent, or part of a broader revenant tradition is often more accurate than naming one specific being. Case studies can further clarify how this method works in practice. Consider a being that visits homes at night, sits on the chest of sleepers, and leaves them breathless and terrified. Blood may or may not be mentioned, but the experience is paralyzing and often accompanied by nightmares. While this might initially suggest a vampire, closer analysis points toward the night hag or Mara, a spirit associated with sleep paralysis in Germanic and Slavic traditions. The absence of feeding on blood, the focus on pressure and fear, and the connection to dreams all shift the identification away from classic vampirism. This example shows how behavior and effect on victims can outweigh superficial similarities. Literary vampires deserve special consideration because they often redefine the category itself. Characters like Dracula combine folkloric traits with authorial invention. Dracula is undead, drinks blood, fears sunlight, and can transform, but he also has aristocratic manners and political ambitions. These latter traits are not common in village folklore but serve the narrative goals of the novel. When a description resembles such a character, one must ask whether it refers to a folkloric creature or a literary archetype. In many modern texts, the answer is the latter, meaning the monster is part of a tradition shaped by fiction as much as by oral belief. Ultimately, the desire to know which vampire or monster a description refers to reflects a deeper curiosity about how cultures personify fear. Monsters are mirrors, reflecting what societies dread most at a given time. By analyzing them thoughtfully, we gain insight not only into classification but into history, psychology, and imagination. The process becomes an act of interpretation rather than mere identification, rewarding patience and attention to nuance. Thus, when confronted with an unfamiliar creature, the best response is not to rush to a name, but to ask structured questions. Where does it come from? What does it do? How does it exist between life and death? What stops it? Who does it target, and why? Through these questions, the monster reveals its lineage. Whether it turns out to be a vampire, a revenant, a demon, or a hybrid of many traditions, the explanation itself becomes a map of human storytelling. In this way, identifying a monster is also an exploration of the culture that imagined it, preserving the richness of folklore rather than reducing it to a single word. Vampires have no reflection, symbolism and meaning. In folklore, literature, and modern media, one of the most striking traits of vampires is that they cast no reflection. Unlike humans and other living beings, a vampire's image does not appear in mirrors, water, or polished surfaces. This peculiar characteristic is not simply a quirky supernatural detail, it is loaded with symbolic significance, offering insight into the vampire myth and the broader human understanding of identity, morality, and existence. The absence of a reflection is one of the most enduring features of the vampire, persisting from early European folklore to Bram Stoker's Dracula and beyond, serving as a rich canvas for metaphorical interpretation. The origins of the idea that vampires have no reflection are somewhat obscure, but they are deeply rooted in European folklore. In pre-modern societies, mirrors were considered to possess mystical properties. They were thought to reflect not only physical appearances but also the soul or spiritual essence of the person looking into them. To be without a reflection was therefore to lack a soul, an idea that is central to the characterization of vampires. The vampire, in these early tales, is not merely a nocturnal predator. It is an entity that exists on the fringes of humanity, an abomination against the natural order, and the inability to appear in a mirror signals that otherness. This lack of reflection thus becomes a visual shorthand for spiritual emptiness and moral corruption. By removing their reflection, folklore communicates that vampires are fundamentally inhuman, alien, and dangerous. They are, in essence, living shadows, creatures who move among humans but are never truly part of the world of the living. From a literary perspective, Bram Stoker's Dracula, 1897, cemented the idea of the reflectionless vampire as a symbol of existential and moral otherness. In the novel, characters who encounter the vampire are often struck not only by his physical presence but also by the eerie, uncanny qualities that signal his unnaturalness. The absence of a reflection is a stark reminder of the vampire's estrangement from humanity. Literature frequently uses mirrors as a motif to explore self-awareness, truth, and the duality of human nature. A reflection provides confirmation that one exists, that one has substance and identity. For the vampire, the mirror's denial of their image underscores their lack of authentic existence. They are hollow beings who feed on the vitality of others. In this sense, the missing reflection represents both the vampire's detachment from human morality and their existential liminality. They exist, but only as a distorted echo of life. The symbolism of the reflectionless vampire extends beyond the spiritual or existential. It also touches on themes of identity, self-perception, and hidden truths. Mirrors in human culture have often served as tools of introspection. When one looks into a mirror, one confronts the self, both the surface appearance and the deeper dimensions of identity. The vampire, devoid of reflection, is denied this self-confrontation. They cannot see themselves as they truly are, which speaks to the nature of their existence, a perpetual denial of humanity. This denial may be read metaphorically as the ultimate alienation. Vampires are frequently depicted as tragic or cursed figures precisely because they are forced to live without a true self-image. In a world obsessed with appearances and self-recognition, the vampire's lack of reflection symbolizes an absolute separation from communal and personal identity. They are invisible to their own consciousness in the most literal sense. Water, in which vampires also do not cast reflections, reinforces this symbolism. Water, like mirrors, has long been associated with the soul, with memory, and with the unconscious. The motif of a vampire not appearing in water amplifies the spiritual and psychological implications of the reflectionless condition. Water is often a medium of truth and revelation. To look into a pool, a lake, or a still pond is to confront one's depth, to face a version of oneself shaped by both reality and perception. The vampire's inability to reflect in water, therefore, symbolizes an absence of inner truth. They are creatures who navigate the world externally, through appearance, charm, or predation, but have no internal mirror to reflect their conscience, their memory, or their moral center. This invisibility in water can also be interpreted as the erasure of history and memory. Vampires live in a suspended state, unanchored by time and devoid of the natural human connection to past and self that reflection represents. In psychoanalytic terms, the vampire's lack of reflection may symbolize the fragmentation of the self. Sigmund Freud and other psychoanalysts have theorized that mirrors play a critical role in identity formation, particularly in early childhood, when the mirror stage allows the individual to recognize themselves as a coherent being. A vampire, by being unable to reflect, embodies a failure of this integration. They are forever caught outside the normal development of selfhood. In Jungian terms, the reflectionless vampire could be seen as a shadow figure, representing the repressed or denied aspects of human nature. They are the embodiment of what humans refuse to confront within themselves: mortality, desire, and the capacity for moral corruption. The absence of reflection is therefore not only a physical anomaly but a mirror to the human psyche, revealing the anxieties and suppressed impulses that society projects onto the monstrous other. Beyond psychology, the absence of a reflection also carries moral and theological weight. In Christian-influenced folklore, mirrors were believed to reflect the soul's light. A soul, in this context, was a spark of divine creation. A creature without a reflection, therefore, is one without divine essence, one separated from God or the natural order. Vampires, as undead beings who subsist on the blood of the living, are often depicted as morally inverted. They take life to sustain their own, violate sacred laws, and operate outside human ethics. The lack of reflection is a visible manifestation of this moral inversion. Where humans reflect light and truth, vampires reflect nothing, they are darkness incarnate. This symbolism reinforces the cultural perception of vampires as inherently evil or corrupt, creatures whose very being defies the moral and spiritual order of human life. The reflectionless vampire also resonates with themes of secrecy, deception, and the duality of human nature. A vampire moves through human society hidden in plain sight, often charming, seductive, and outwardly appealing. The absence of a reflection parallels this duplicity. The vampire presents one face to the world but has no internal image, no true self that can be mirrored or verified. This duality makes them simultaneously fascinating and terrifying, reflecting humanity's own anxieties about appearances versus reality. In literature, the mirror often functions as a revealer of truth, exposing hidden motivations and unspoken realities. Vampires, unable to be revealed in this way, embody the ultimate concealment, a living paradox that challenges the reliability of perception and the notion of authenticity. Modern interpretations of vampires continue to explore these themes. In contemporary film and literature, the reflectionless quality is sometimes downplayed or ignored, yet its symbolic resonance persists. Writers and filmmakers use it to signal otherness, danger, and alienation. In some cases, it is tied to themes of immortality and the psychological burden of eternal life. The vampire does not see themselves aging, decaying, or evolving. They exist outside the normal flow of human experience, and their absence from mirrors reinforces this suspension. Others interpret it as a commentary on self-denial or narcissism. A vampire may appear outwardly attractive and alluring, but without a reflection, their external beauty is empty, lacking the grounding of self-awareness and moral substance. In this way, the mirror serves as a cultural barometer. A lack of reflection signals both physical and moral emptiness, a life without depth, continuity, or truth. The motif also has connections to cultural anxieties about disease, contamination, and social deviance. In many vampire legends, the creature's lack of reflection parallels their status as unnatural or taboo. Just as mirrors reveal a person's external truth, the absence of reflection reveals the vampire's hidden danger. They are physically present but spiritually absent, socially seductive but morally hollow. The reflectionless vampire becomes a symbol of the uncanny, simultaneously familiar and profoundly alien. In a broader cultural sense, this characteristic expresses human fears of invisibility, moral contamination, and the unknowable other that infiltrates society undetected. Vampires are simultaneously a fascination and a warning, and the lack of reflection crystallizes this tension in a simple yet powerful visual metaphor. In addition, the lack of reflection can be interpreted as a meditation on mortality. Mirrors and reflective surfaces are not only tools for self-recognition, they are also symbols of temporality, showing the passage of time in the subtle changes of our own features. The vampire, in escaping death, also escapes this temporal mirror. They do not reflect the natural aging process, yet in doing so, they underscore the unnaturalness of their existence. This paradox emphasizes the theme of life denied and death postponed, a liminal state where the vampire is perpetually caught between worlds. Their reflectionlessness embodies the existential anxiety of immortality, the fear that eternal life without growth, memory, or self-awareness is a hollow imitation of true human experience. The absence of a reflection, therefore, operates on multiple levels: spiritual, psychological, moral, and existential. It is a versatile and enduring symbol because it captures the essence of what makes the vampire compelling as a mythic figure. Vampires are outsiders, predators, and mirrors of human fears, and the reflectionless trait condenses these qualities into a single, haunting image. It allows folklore and literature to communicate complex ideas about identity, morality, and alienation without explicit exposition, relying on visual and symbolic resonance to evoke understanding. In the vampire's lack of reflection is more than a curious supernatural trait, it is a profound symbol rich with meaning. From its folkloric origins as a sign of soullessness to its literary elaboration as a marker of moral, spiritual, and existential otherness, the reflectionless vampire embodies humanity's deepest anxieties about identity, self-awareness, morality, and mortality. Mirrors and reflective surfaces are powerful metaphors for the self, the soul, and the passage of time. The vampire's absence from these reflections signals a rupture in these essential human experiences. They are creatures without a moral center, without self-recognition, without the grounding of temporal existence. They are simultaneously seductive and terrifying, familiar and alien, visible yet spiritually invisible. Through this motif, the vampire becomes a mirror of humanity's own fears, desires, and contradictions. The absence of reflection reminds us that to be human is not only to exist physically but to possess a soul, a moral conscience, and a self that can be recognized and reflected. Vampires, in their reflectionless state, represent the haunting possibility of life without these essentials, a cautionary symbol, a compelling monster, and a timeless emblem of otherness. Creative Brainstorm, the Umbravore Vampire Concept Overview. The Umbravore is a new breed of vampire that feeds not on blood, but on shadows and emotional resonance. Unlike classic vampires who thrive on the life essence of living creatures, Umbravores absorb the darkness within environments and people, the literal shadows cast by light, and the metaphorical shadows of human emotions such as fear, despair, envy, or sorrow. This makes them elusive, psychological predators, blending supernatural horror with a philosophical exploration of human darkness. Rule: the Umbravore can only feed on emotional shadows during twilight or in artificial darkness. Direct sunlight burns its essence, while bright emotional energy, joy, love, hope, weakens it. The more despair or fear in an environment, the stronger it becomes. Physical description and anatomy. The Umbravore's physical form is malleable, often fluid and semi-intangible, resembling a living shadow more than a corporeal body. It can manifest in various ways depending on what it is feeding from. Default form: a formless, writhing shadow that stretches and distorts. It appears almost humanoid but with exaggerated limbs and tendrils that ripple like liquid ink. Its face is featureless, save for glowing eyes that reflect the intensity of absorbed emotion. Feeding form: when feeding, the Umbravore can extend shadowy tendrils into the surroundings, curling around objects or people. These tendrils can phase through walls or floors, following the darkest corners. Physical mimicry: after feeding heavily on an individual, it can partially take on their form, becoming a shadowy doppelganger that is uncanny and distorted, an embodiment of their fears. This allows it to manipulate social situations or escape detection. Biology: the Umbravore's body is composed of densely packed shadow matter, which exists partially in another plane of reality. This allows it to phase through light barriers, pass through walls, and flatten itself to infiltrate even small spaces. Its core, called the Umbra Heart, glows faintly when absorbing shadow energy. If the Umbra Heart is destroyed in direct light, the creature dies instantly. Feeding mechanics: unlike traditional vampires that bite and suck blood, Umbravores consume shadow energy and emotional darkness through the following mechanics. Shadow absorption: the Umbravore absorbs literal shadows, growing larger and more solid. Dark areas with minimal light, such as alleyways, basements, or overcast nights, provide strong sustenance. Shadows cast by humans are more nourishing, especially if the person is experiencing negative emotions. Emotional resonance feeding: the Umbravore can sense strong emotions like fear, grief, or anger. By concentrating, it can drink these emotions, converting them into physical strength and regenerative power. The creature can amplify human emotional shadows to make feeding more efficient. It whispers subtle fears into minds, creating paranoia and dread, then absorbs the resulting emotional energy. Time-sensitive feeding. Twilight, dusk and dawn is the optimal feeding window because natural light is dim enough to not harm it, but enough shadow exists to feed effectively. Artificial darkness, like darkened rooms or blackout curtains, allows it to operate during the day. Sunlight or intense bright light burns the shadow matter, causing extreme pain and potentially killing it. Feeding effects. Absorbed shadows and emotions can be converted into temporary superhuman abilities, strength, speed, invisibility in darkness, and even minor telepathy to detect fears. A fully fed Umbravore is almost unstoppable in shadowed environments, able to manipulate darkness as a weapon. Hunger weakens the creature, making it less cohesive and vulnerable to light or attacks. Weaknesses and limitations. To make the Umbravore compelling and balanced, it has distinct weaknesses. Light sensitivity. Direct sunlight or intense artificial light causes the shadow matter to destabilize. Weak exposure results in pain, disorientation, and temporary shrinking. Prolonged exposure destroys the Umbra heart. Positive emotion vulnerability. Joy, love, and hope are antithetical to the Umbravore's essence. Environments filled with happiness or strong positive memories weaken it, causing retreat or defensive behavior. Protective wards infused with laughter, compassion, or light can deter it. Emotional overload. If it absorbs too much negative emotion too quickly, it risks destabilizing its Umbra heart. Overconsumption causes hallucinations, loss of form, or uncontrollable lashing out. Limited mobility in bright areas. The Umbravore is at its most powerful in dark or twilight conditions. Brightly lit or open areas limit its physical manipulation and stealth. Powers and abilities. The Umbravore's abilities are both supernatural and psychological. Shadow manipulation. It can extend its shadow tendrils to attack, restrain, or engulf targets. Shadows it absorbs can form temporary solid constructs or weapons. Fear projection. By sensing emotional vulnerability, it can project illusions tied to personal fears. These projections intensify the victim's dread, increasing the emotional nutrition it can absorb. Invisibility and stealth. In darkness, it becomes nearly invisible, blending seamlessly with shadows. Movement is silent, and physical matter can phase partially through solid objects. Mimicry and psychological manipulation. It can take the distorted form of its prey after feeding, creating confusion and fear. Psychological warfare is a natural part of hunting, often leaving victims paranoid or socially isolated. Regeneration. Feeding accelerates healing, allowing the Umbravore to recover from most injuries unless exposed to intense light or destroyed at its core. Behavior and hunting style. Unlike traditional vampires that stalk humans for blood, the Umbravore's approach is more insidious and manipulative. Predatory philosophy. The Umbravore seeks out fear and despair, targeting individuals or groups where negative emotions are concentrated. It is more strategic than feral, often orchestrating situations to generate emotional shadow for consumption. Stalking and infiltration. It prefers to lurk in the periphery, watching and waiting until the emotional shadow density is sufficient. Human paranoia works to its advantage. Victims may unknowingly isolate themselves, making them easier to prey upon. Hive behavior. Rarely solitary, multiple Umbravores can share shadow networks, pooling emotional energy in certain locations. Larger congregations can manipulate entire neighborhoods or institutions, creating zones of fear and despair. Interaction with humans. The Umbravore may leave cryptic messages or manipulate environments to drive victims into emotional distress. It is cunning and can simulate normal human behavior when partially mimicking someone, making detection extremely difficult. Lore and mythology. In this fictional universe, the Umbravore is said to have originated as a spiritual parasite from the liminal spaces between light and dark, drawn to human suffering. Ancient texts describe them as devourers of inner night, feared not for raw strength but for their ability to twist reality through shadow and fear. Historical myths. Medieval folklore spoke of shade spirits that entered homes during storms, feeding on fear and sadness. Many myths conflated Umbravores with demons, though their true nature is more parasitic than malevolent. They seek sustenance, not necessarily destruction. Cultural impact. Areas with unusually high despair, such as war-torn regions, were rumored to have clusters of Umbravores, creating urban legends about living shadows. Some secret societies claimed to harness Umbravores, attempting to channel emotional energy as a form of power. Unique rule system for the Umbravore. To define how it works mechanically in a story, game, or roleplay, the following rule set can be applied. Shadow and emotion absorption. Every hour spent in darkness or shadowed environments restores energy proportionally to the ambient despair or fear. Feeding on strong negative emotions amplifies strength and speed for 1 hour per unit of emotional energy absorbed. Light vulnerability. Exposure to sunlight, 1 unit per minute burns 10% of health. Bright artificial light, 1 unit per 5 minutes burns 5% of health. Emotional overload. Absorbing more than 3 units of intense negative emotion in under 10 minutes causes temporary instability. Instability, hallucinations, form distortion, potential self-harm to the Umbra heart. Twilight efficiency. Optimal feeding during dawn or dusk doubles absorption rate. Artificial darkness simulates twilight but requires the Umbravore to remain stationary. Positive energy weakness. Strong positive emotions within 10 meters reduce power by 20%. Direct exposure to happiness rituals, laughter, or light-infused sanctuaries can repel it. Creative uses in storytelling and gameplay. Horror setting. The Umbravore thrives in psychological horror scenarios, where the villain is unseen, creating paranoia and fear. Its prey may become unreliable narrators, questioning reality. Adventure, game mechanics. Players can interact with it indirectly, using light, hope, and emotional manipulation as weapons. Combat isn't just physical, it's psychological and environmental. Philosophical exploration. The creature can be used to explore themes like the human relationship with despair, the nature of fear, and the ethics of survival by feeding on suffering. Urban legends and modern horror. In a contemporary setting, Umbravores could lurk in cities, feeding on stressed, fearful populations. They could influence media, manipulate social media fear cycles, or haunt neglected urban areas. The Umbravore represents a radical departure from traditional vampire lore, blending supernatural horror, psychological manipulation, and moral exploration. Its feeding on shadows and emotional resonance, combined with its weaknesses to light and positive emotion, makes it both terrifying and narratively versatile. By defining precise rules for its feeding mechanics, abilities, vulnerabilities, and behavior, the Umbravore can be seamlessly integrated into storytelling, role-playing games, or creative fiction. It challenges characters not only to confront danger but also to confront the emotional darkness within themselves, making every encounter a test of wit, courage, and emotional resilience. And there you have it, the mysterious vampire monster that leaves no reflection, not even in water. Whether legend or something more sinister, its story reminds us how much darkness hides just beyond the light. Have you ever felt like something was watching you when no one was there? Share your thoughts or encounters in the comments. We love hearing your spooky stories. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss our deep dives into the world's creepiest myths and monsters. Until next time, watch your reflection closely.